Tosan, Tom Hitchcock, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you, Tom. It's good to be here today.
It's good to have you here. I know we've been trying to book this up. I reckon it started off as weeks. I reckon it's gone into months now. I reckon it's
I think it's
transitioned
gone
over.
into words. I agree with you.
Yeah, they say good things come to those who wait, though. That's my favourite Guinness
Absolutely.
advert, that is. But,
Absolutely.
but before I get into those, can I just say I love your colour scheme.
So do I love yours too. We have the same color scheme, and obviously there's a lot of chemistry going on with the mindset and the colors as well.
Yes. Well, we do like the colour purple. I remember in April Fools, we played a little joke on Planet LinkedIn, and I think I did it on Facebook as well.
Yeah.
Pretended that Cadbury's was suing me for the colour purple, without naming Cadbury's. It's the first time I mentioned that, and people joke initially, but then when I kept it going a little bit longer, people, is this guy serious? Is this guy? That's really harsh of him. So I started getting messages from people saying, "Oh, Tom, put it back to purple. Don't worry about Cadbury. They're not gonna get me." Anyway, mate, it's not about me today. We've invited you onto the podcast to share your story and whatever it is that you want to sort of partake on our listeners, if you like. So please introduce yourself, my friend.
So my name is Tosan Jemide. I'm a restorative leadership expert. I would say that I stumbled into this from my lived experience of burnout. Originally, I was a baker doing cakes and bread. And then I burnt out. I crashed literally from 100 to 0. And I took 1 year off. 1 year where I did absolutely nothing, tried to find myself again. And in that space, I started to discover my journey into burnout and out of burnout. And that brought me to this whole new ideation of you've got a story, you've got something to share with people. And so today, what I do is I help leaders and teams avoid burnout and slowly learn to lead with intention. I use baking as the unexpected power. And I have a framework called the Rewire Framework, which I guide them through when I run workshops or anything that I'm having to do.
Okay.
So
All right.
that's
So,
essentially what I do.
okay. Well, listen, first things first, thanks for being open and transparent with parts of your past, which some people, be a bit sensitive about as well. I
Yeah.
know, like burnout, for example, it's getting a bit of attention now for the right
Yeah.
reasons. People are overworking, they're exhausted, and they're stretching themselves too thin. Yeah, we're all guilty of it. But I think there used to be an attitude there used to be a slang word in the UK a little bit before my time called the yuppie, and the yuppie was the working lunch, beyond hours, whatever, do whatever you need to do to get it done, which is all very commendable as part of a hustle.
Yeah.
But it meant you wore a burnout as a badge of honor.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, that culture still exists actually, where you're commended for overextension, you're commended for staying late at work and getting things done, you're commended for going over and above, over and beyond the call of duty. And that's what gets you pay rises. That's what gets attention of management because that's a great worker. He's always on top of his game or her game, So it's a narrative that has been on for a long time. And I think it's still on. There's not enough attention being paid to, you know, focusing on the well-being of the staff first, because well-being comes before anything else, essentially.
Yep, I agree. Have you ever heard of a gentleman called Tom Cronin?
I've heard of it. Yeah, I have. I think
Yeah,
I
so
have. Yeah.
he had an interesting story, but we go back years now.
Yeah.
Well, he kind of was the Australian Wolf of Wall Street, if you like. I'm sure he won't mind me saying that. but he was burning out. He did an age test, and I think in his mid-20s, he was coming up as late 40s based on how the stress and the burnout was affecting his DNA essentially. And then what he started to do, so we're talking 80s here, in the stock exchange, the
Yeah.
ASX here in Sydney, he fixed it by doing meditation. And this is when meditation wasn't fashionable. So he would be in the middle of imagine it, in the middle of a stock floor in the 80s, early 90s, meditating. You can just imagine how that went down.
It wouldn't have gone down at all.
Needless to say, he didn't stay in stockbroking for too much longer. He's
Yeah.
now a meditation teacher, coach, and da da da.
Yeah. I mean, we need to understand that, the speed and the rate at which people are pushed to work it's just not sustainable. I always use this analogy, and when I throw it at people, they begin to say, "Oh, yeah, that's true." Because imagine you're running a marathon, and you decide, I need a strategy to get me through to the end. And my strategy is going to be speed. And I'm running a marathon. And I decide, you know what? I need a strategy as well. But you know what? I'm not going to go speed all through. I'm going to speed, pause, pace myself so that I still have my breath, I still have my strength, I still have my energy going through till the end. Who's going to win?
You all day long. We know this.
That's the thing. It's not sustainable.
Well, was you the person that overtook me in the London Marathon when I was trying to
Well,
sprint up there with the Kenyans?
it was me, you recall. Yeah, and that's what we keep missing out, where we think, speed is the barometer for efficiency, and the faster you go, the more efficient you are. You can get more things done quickly. Yes, in the start, but it's not sustainable, and it doesn't create longevity in any way.
I think you're right there, and I suppose it's the rabbit and the tortoise and the hare, isn't it? That one. In all fairness, but I suppose you can also argue then it's also about knowing the race, so knowing what your end goal is, what you're trying to achieve, because if that same end goal was 100-meter sprint, then speed actually is the answer, But I think people really need to calibrate and determine where it is that they are heading, and what is the best route to go ahead and do this, the most efficient route that's going to work for them and deliver the best particular outcomes,
Correct. Correct. I do agree with you there because whatever your goal is, you still need to incorporate pauses. So assume your goal was 100 meters and you decided you're going to do the 100 meters. After the first race, you will have to stop. You're still going to have to pause anyway because you can't keep going another 100, and without stopping to catch your breath. So pausing is essential, whatever the goal is. That's just what I've learned over time.
I read this book. It was about these runners in central Mexico, and they could go for days with running and whatever, and they're looking into the dynamics of it. Oh, I forget what it's called now. I'll add it in the comments once this is published. It's a worthy read, even if you're a runner or not, because there's lots of analysis there. But they researched the whys and the biology even of animals just to try to work out what makes this work. And they checked the cheetah, okay, and they had the Maasai warrior that works with the cheetahs for the kills. And obviously this is the fastest animal out there. You can't catch up with it, but they could work with
absolutely.
it. And the reason they could work with it is because they can only do short sprints, not because they get tired. They can keep running. It's because when the speed they go, their stomach, each time they step, rams into their lungs.
Ooh.
And the quicker they go, it actually puffs out the lungs just because of the way their body dynamic is.
That's
Okay.
interesting.
So you'll see them, they literally stop and you could go near a cheetah then, they could be hungry, they could be whatever, but they can barely walk because their lungs are filling back up with air again, oxygen, after the few hundred meters they've done. They literally cannot move, and you can see them panting, and the Maasai warriors are around it. They've done work that they need to do, and then they can just walk up and take the kill.
Easy as.
Yeah, it was I found that interesting. Hopefully, that's more to your point there. So, but anyway, tell us a bit about your book, Tosan.
So essentially, the book, it's called, the title of the book is Your Team Needs You. Needs is KNEADS, which is used as a pawn. Essentially, your team actually needs you as a leader. You need to be able to be in that space where you're in sync with your team and they're feeling your pulse. You're present for them, and you're just there. I found from my experience, which is what sort of prompted this book. I was leading a team I had back in Nigeria. I had a large bakery to produce about 28,000 loaves a day. I had another business that was like a bespoke cake line doing massive wedding cakes, $10,000 a pop kind of wedding cake. And I ran two spectrum of businesses. One was bespoke, needed my attention, needed my creativity. And I also ran another that was 24 hours, mass production, commercial, but it needed my 100% attention because we ran two shifts, a day shift and a night shift. So I needed to be present almost 24/7. And over time, I started to realize that something was wrong. I didn't know what it was. I couldn't name it. There was no label for it, but I just couldn't place it. I just wasn't myself anymore. I wasn't functioning. And I started to notice that, you know, there were telltale signs. There seemed to be ripple effects. I'd go into a meeting and, the enthusiasm was no longer there. You know, when you're sort of anchoring a meeting and you're asking questions and you're boisterous, very attentive and productive team members who would always chime in and, go with the enthusiasm, everyone will sort of dying out. And I was wondering what's happening. Why you guys say something? And, so I'm not prompting, speak. You have to say something. So it became very robotic and no longer spontaneous. And there are a lot of things. And by the time I realized I was burnt out, or it was burnout. It was literally too late. I got my aha moment one night. I started in the office. I mean, it was primarily my culture to get in first and to leave late. That was a sign of good leadership. People needed to see me as a role model. I needed to get into the office before anyone, and I needed to leave last. And I stayed back one evening. That evening, I had a mirror opposite me, and that I looked at myself. That mirror always served the purpose of restoring me and boosting my confidence and reminding me of who I was. But that evening, it was a totally different thing. And that was when I saw myself and I'm like, who the hell is this? And that was my burnout recognition, where I started to pull out all the things that had been happening, the layers of things that happened over the years, the overextension, the pushing myself, the working extra hours, the attending to 20 things at the same time, being the one fixing everybody, fixing everything, industry leader, just name it. And that moment became a moment where I broke completely and I realized that, you know what, you're dying, literally dying slowly. And it took me a long time to process my experience from that night because there was a lot of shame. There was a lot of loss of confidence. There was a lot of fear and sense of doom because I was used to being in control. I was used to being the guy that he knew what he was doing. But all of a sudden, I lost all of that. I wasn't sleeping. Everything, it was tending towards depressive. So I couldn't share it with anyone because for me, that was failure. Labeled, put enough. It was just failure, outright failure. How do you go out and begin to announce to people like you failed when everyone's looking up to you and you're the role model. So I couldn't say a word. But I slowly absorbed that night and my experience, cried myself completely out, and I started to process it slowly. And in processing it, it took me a longer time, but I I started finding my way slowly back. And I realized that I had a methodology that I used in finding my way back. I realized where I was before I discovered through my mirror of the night. And I realized how I found my way back from that mirror moment night. And so I decided, you know what? Talk to a few people and see what the response is. And I started talking to people, and I got a lot of this happens to me or it happened to me. Same feeling. And nobody wants to talk about it because there's obviously that sense of shame attached to labeling yourself as a failure. And I started to see this is it's not failure. It's actually it's a failure of the system, not the person, not the people. The system has told us that we need to be a certain type of way to be leaders. We need to stand strong. We shouldn't be vulnerable. We have to show strength every time. And that's what good leadership is about. And even if you don't have the capacity, it's not proper for you to show it because people look at you and, even stakeholders begin to see, you're not competent. Why are you leading this team? You don't have the right ingredients, because you're being honest. And nobody ever taught me how to manage that role as a leader. I learned how to do so many things. I learned how to strategize over time. I learned how to manage a team of middle senior managers. I learned how to communicate right. I learned so many things. I learned stakeholder management. I learned how to review reports and do financial. But no, I didn't learn and I wasn't ever prepared for the challenges that came with dealing with humanity and being a leader at the same time. I was a leader, but I was struggling at home. I had a failed marriage. It affected my kids. It affected me. I was going through that divorce was it took a toll on me. But I was told, and I used to tell my staff, leave your problems at home. Come to work and do work. Everyone's got problems. So I had to do it. But I realized it's not doable because it's the same heart that you use to lead at work that you function with at home. You don't have two different hearts. You don't have, it's not two different people. You can't leave your problems at the door and come in and ignore them 100%. They come in with you. You try to manage it, but because you're silent about it, you can't really deal with it like you should. And so I started to find out that there's a need to speak up about what I went through. And maybe one person at a time can actually identify with what I went through and use the framework that I used to get out of my burnout phase and help them. And so that's why I've written them.
I appreciate that. And I was chatting with another business coach earlier today, and they were talking about how you can't fight two battles on the same, have two battles simultaneously. So if you've got home problems and work problems, you can deal with one or the other. When you've got both, all bets are off. It just doesn't work. And
Absolutely.
And that would take anybody to burn out, okay? And there's probably a lot of people listening to this that that most of this would resonate with, especially the business owners, especially the leaders out there, because the further up the food chain you get, yeah, you earn more, absolutely, but the responsibility is heightened, which means you wear everything. Okay, those problems are significant. They're sophisticated. They're complex. They're emotional. They have consequences, and it all sits on you. You weather everything. You need to process it. You need to push it through. So I think people need to hear that. We've spoken to a couple of burnout experts over the years as well on here too. And one of their first points of reference it is to reach out to others. It has to happen. You have to vocalize it. You need to hear your own voice talking your problem. It isn't about what they say in turn. You just need
Yeah,
to say stuff. Okay.
yeah,
And
yeah.
surround yourself with people. And then your environment starts to shift. The dynamic changes. These little air pockets arrive, and you can see the benefit it has to you. So it's the beginning. It's the first step that needs to happen, essentially.
Correct. I mean, that silence is what actually creates the burnout. The fact that you're unable to speak about what you're going through and you internalize it, and I realized over time that, burnout actually, it doesn't begin from exhaustion. It doesn't start with exhaustion. It's not about the workload. It's more about the fact that you lie to yourself, consistently over time, and there becomes a pattern of, Tom, how are you today? And what blots out is, "Oh, I'm fine. I'm fine. I'm
The
fine."
auto response.
Yeah, magical. I'm fine. I'm fine. I'm fine. I'm fine. I'm fine. I'm fine. But you're not fine. And because you can't really come out to express yourself authentically in a way that is true, you just sort of internalize everything and it becomes an explosion eventually.
Okay. All right. Well, this is definitely people that need to hear this. We're pretty close to the end of this episode now, but there's probably three things I just want to nip in the bud as we get rid of you, Tosan. Is firstly, where can they go to purchase the book? Secondly, if someone wants to speak with you, they'd like to connect with you, what's the best way to reach out? And there was a third thing, but it slipped me by.
Yeah. I know how we can have too many things on our mind and just end up slipping so many things by, but that's okay. I will deal with the two. Hope, well, the book you can actually get, it's available on Amazon. So you can just go to Amazon, look for it. Your Team Needs You. It will pop up, and there's the ebook and there's the paperback copy, which is both available for sale. And if you do want to find me, talk to me. I'm on LinkedIn. The best way to find me is probably just go on my LinkedIn and look for Tosan Jemide.
Okay. Well, what we'll do is when this gets published, we'll probably ask you to put the link for both the book and yourself into the chat.
Absolutely.
And what I will do is I'll tap you up for a copy of the book, and I'll do a swap with my book as well. We'll do a couple of signed copies for each other. We'll make each other famous, eh?
Beautiful. I'm happy to do that swap with you. Pur- purple book, purple book for a purple man.
That's it. We'll take that. What a brilliant wrap up to a session. So listen, thank you very much for sharing your story, and thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much, Tom. It's been a wonderful time here tonight.
Hello again, I am Mr. Purple. Thanks again for watching this video. If you like my videos, if you like what we try to do here, please subscribe if you haven't done it already. The other thing that's very popular right now is the t-shirts, the Mr. Purple t-shirts. There's lots of people wearing these at the moment. You can grab yours on our website, copying this link below. So once again, thanks for listening. We love your feedback. Engage with us and speak soon.